Article 11. We're good.
Okay.
And Article 8 and 9, which are the latest ones. 8, the only thing is I think we need to put a D in place.
Hmm.
But other than that, we're good.
Okay.
And then on 9, we're good with language. My question would be, and that this is more of a technical,
Mhm.
the 9.1.2, the added statement. I'm actually wondering if it fits better under 9.2.
So if we're in agreement on language, we can fix that in the cleanup committee at the end. We can
Right,
do
but
that.
I just wanted to note that. Other than that, we're good.
Okay. All right, well, what we'll do is we'll start with these orphaned articles that we've been waiting a long time for Nancy or Brian to get hold of this. I went back through my notes and looked at a couple things, so I think we're really close on one of them. But there is a couple small changes that I did translate between mine and Nancy's discussion and what I saw from you guys. So I put in what I think that represents. I just want to hand this out there.
What's the difference between yellow and dark blue?
Oh, the colors again.
I feel like
I know what
we
you
need to write them up and so I don't know what the colors.
Yes.
Because I-
Well, usually I remember to change it every time too. So let's wait till we all get one there. All right, so the first one here, this should be in blue, but I forgot, so it's in yellow. But basically, we've unstruck all of that language. The concern when I discussed it with Nancy on this article was the way it was written is that it could be interpreted. If, let's say that, God forbid the teachers are on strike and classified at work and they want to go out on their lunch break and show support on the solidarity in the line and stuff like that with them during their own time, when they're not with kids and all that stuff during their own times or before, after work. But this was written so loosely that the concern was that that could be a violation of the contract. And I don't think that was the intent when this was written. Obviously, I wasn't there. But the point of that sentence is what me and Nancy talked about. It was about having it really clear that they're on their own time, they're released from their duties at the time. If they want to show their support, the First Amendment, all that stuff, they have the right to do that. They just can't participate in these other functions, and they have to, cross the big line, those things like that. So that's the point of that sentence at the end there. It seemed like a lot clearer than striking it all out and starting over. And down below under 21.4, I actually believe that should be in green. I believe this was language from Nancy that you guys shared with me. Please double check that, but I think that one is actually good to go. And then if you go to 22 on the next page, if you go, I think we're in agreement, everything on this page except for 22.25. Again, I had this discussion with your attorney. Concern here is that agreements, we need to have the rep there to deal with it because we're held to standard legally that it has to be applied fairly evenly and not outside the contract and those kinds of things. And that's the reason for that change. It's not to subsequently change the language in any other way. It's to make it clear that we want consistency. We want to be able to cover our backsides legally, make sure that we know what's going on, so we don't have things being settled 5 different ways without us being in the room. And I don't think that's been the practice here as well, but it just makes sense to clean it up while we're here. But with the exception of that one change from may to shall, that's everything else is agreed to on that page. The following page, we'll see some different changes here in blue. So again, under 22.3.3, I went back and looked a while back. I couldn't find any forms used. I couldn't find any used, period. It was letters and emails for agreements, things like that. And when I had this discussion with Nancy also, this is what I expected to see from you guys, is what I put here, something along these lines. And so we want to be really clear what should be in the grievance, right? So that the form is less important. We send an email, we have receipt that email, everybody knows what happened. But having these things in the grievance, we know what we're talking about. It's clearly stated, we know who they talked to try to resolve it before it became an actual grievance. that's what you see at A through D there laid out there. I'm hoping that that will help with that, because I don't know that a form. I guess the only other thing a form could do is to spell out these procedures right here, but if they're spelled out here, then we don't need them on a form. And again, I haven't seen a form be used here in a long time. Actually, I couldn't find an example. And then under,
So Kobe, I'm sorry, can I just
Go
have a
ahead.
pause for a minute, just really out of clarity, your colors, I really need to
Yeah.
know. Because
Blue
yellow
is-
usually means
Right.
new,
blue is new, yeah.
blue is
Yeah.
newer.
It's
than
the
the
newest
yellow.
version, yeah. If it's yellow or blue, it's what we're proposing.
Okay,
Green is what I believe we've agreed on. But, since we had a whole bunch at the beginning, it was a lot of yellow, we put in the blue to try to give your eyes the ability to like find it, right? But now we've gotten rid of a lot of the yellow, it's kind of, I don't know, anyway, it's
thank
fun.
you.
So, and then under 22.3.5, we've accepted your change, the bottom, talking about the contract with the bargaining employee, and of course, Article 4. I did leave struck out employee or because it speaks right below, so you still want the process above, and we talked about that, Nancy and I, and it made sense that we would have a different process for students, stuff like that, it would make more sense. But it seemed redundant to put it up here and then refer to it differently down here, so that was the point of making that change, it's more of just housekeeping at this point, since we've accepted the green below there. And then this here also 22.3.6 we had struck out. I've added, again, following the same theme, accepted in accordance with Article 4. We have the process laid out there where it talks about how we do these investigations, notification given, the length of time. We think it's spelled out pretty good in our Article 4. So that's why I'm referring that back to that process. So it's not in conflict with what we're doing. And then again, you'll see again under 22.3.8. So this talks about handling grievances during regular workday, times interfere with assigned duties. Well, we have that laid out really clearly again, how that would work under Article 4. So I referred it back to that process because, if you've looked at that article recently, it's, we have to put in writing what we're going to do, when we're going to do it. I mean, it's pretty, substantial process. That clarifies, I believe, what this says here. So we're not, because I originally had it struck out. We felt that would be a way to tie the two together. Under 22.3.9, we initially had 30, you guys came back with 15. We thought maybe a good middle spot would be 20 days. And that's what you see reflected in that section and the following section under 22.4 is, again, it's the same 20 days. It's not 20 upon 20 upon 20. If you read the language, it's all talking about when you should have known about it or when you find out about it, or when the incident is. We felt that was kind of a good middle point to meet you at. So we have 20 on the next two sections for that. That's why it's in blue. And then under 22.4.2, you'll see the third sentence down and sign it. Well, we've been for writing that could email, but it's going to be, again, what's signing it kind of seems, if we're not having a form, if I send you an email, you would have the receipt of that, would be the same difference. That's why it's struck. Mostly just for housekeeping. Down below here, we left this in here. It talks about the complaint set forth, the facts that are on which claim is based, but then it says, and we have a period there, because and the reasons why they agree to consider the decision rendered is unacceptable. That seems so vastly subjective. It could be for any reason, the way it's written, right? It could be I just didn't like it, and that could be the reason, right? So it doesn't feel helpful to the process. It seems to only maybe possibly inflame either one side or the other by either the response or feeling that it's, inflammatory by asking the question if we don't have agreement on something. So that's why we show it struck there. I don't see that it helps us in the process. I think if we're laying out the facts of our case and we give you possible resolutions, that you have that to work with, and if we can't get there, we can't get there. But this just feels like an unnecessary step that just seeks to, in my mind, add a red herring to the process that we just don't need. So we've left that struck out. Down below, everything else is green and agreed to. Down is my understanding down to 22.4.4. Now this issue, this is a very interesting issue because me and Nancy had very different opinions on this, which probably is not shocking. But I didn't see her address it, and so I took a stab at it here. What I'm trying to do here is I write a grievance up at level 1. These are my issues, Brian or Jennifer. This is my issue, right? Or maybe these are my 2 issues. I'm grieving over. we should be held accountable to those are the issues and not bringing in every other issue around to make the grievance to something that was never meant to be. But if we get to like the second step or the third step, and we find additional information either side that bolsters your case or better defines it, we should be allowed to put that information into the record because we're trying to get to resolution on those issues. And I won't speak for Nancy, but I will say this, that I walked away from her thinking that she didn't feel that was unreasonable. But again, I didn't see something from you guys, so I'm not sure, what happened with that, if it just kind of one of those things that just fell off the table because got other things going on. So that's what I'm taking a stab at doing here, is saying that at level 1 grievance should be the issue we're arbitrating, or issues. That's where we should be arbitrating. We shouldn't be adding issues as we go along, right? That's the intent of that language, the way I have it written there. And then if you turn the page, I believe we're agreed to just about everything that you gave back to me for the kind of redoing some of the arbitration stuff. The very, very bottom, we had a concern here. This is something that was news to me when I ran it by legal, is that sometimes I think the intent of this language was if you litigate that you don't grieve. I think that was the intent, right? And you see it written the other way. If you grieve, you don't litigate, right? I mean, it depends on the contract, but with this way the language was written, what I was told could be a concern is sometimes ERB will say, well, this should have been handled through the grievance procedure, and then they try to force it back through, right? So it creates a possible conflict there. And so that's why we've come up with the language we have. We believe that leaves that open. If that situation was to arise, we would have the ability to do that without creating a huge headache. Because typically how it works, especially in the private sector, is you file, if you file a board charge and you file a grievance, they almost always say, okay, board charge sets to the side till the grievance procedure is done, right? Because they don't want to deal with it, they don't have to. So that's usually what happens, is my understanding here, when we have both things filed at the same time, we pick our path and we go with it. But occasionally, I guess in more recent decisions, so I'm being told, I'm not the attorney here, but our attorney told me that what's happened is they've been trying to force some of the stuff back through the grievance procedure. So that would be the conflict with the language you have here. And that's the only reason why you see a change there. Otherwise, we would accept what you had. And it was very exciting stuff. I can't believe nobody else wanted to talk about it with me and Nancy. If you go to the next page, we've withdrawn our striking the waiver. Again, we don't believe that it can be enforced under the law, but we're trying to get a deal here, so we're pulling that off the table. You'll see under 43.3, we're waiting to see how long the contracts are going to be, so we don't have that totally spelled out there. But we did add the language you suggested, Jennifer. Article 11 shall reopen executive agreement, basically pulled from a version of the contract we had in the other one. You made a good point that really should be down here under the duration somewhere saying we're going to reopen. So I added that language there. Everything else should be the same you've seen already.
So there's hope. We're looking at a 2-year at least.
But since we don't know, I can't put it in until I know, right? So, but yeah, I think we're close on that one. And did you want us to go through the bundle, or did you want to go through your 2 short ones first?
Let's go through your bundle.
Okay.
Go in order, don't look at the end. Please and thank you. This one is not too much of other colors, so. This first one's-
Yeah, wait, Cameron, do you want us to?
She went to get her inhaler, so she'll probably be a little bit.
Okay, so first, one of the articles, we believe everything in green that we've agreed to. Article 5 of reclassification, we have the one sentence under 5.2. Appointed representatives cannot be the requesting employee, supervisor, or director. And then to take out the word not binding. So that's our ask. We'll finish up on Article 5.
Stripped out all the other. Okay.
Article 10, I believe we went through. Article 10, we don't get to yellow and blue until we get to 10.6 on the longevity pay. And some of that we'll talk about when we do the salary schedule at the end of this. We've been wiping all that out, and then if someone can read what's in blue, since I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I won't read it word for word, but essentially it mirrors what we're gonna ask for later, that when you get to the top of your scale, you get that 5% hit, and then you get the 1% annually after that to hopefully maintain it. And we'll go into more detail on that when you get to the end of the proposal. Okay.
And then this one at the end, it's a COVID pandemic thing.
Yeah, we slotted COVID pandemic pay in here because we had pulled that and the hazardous bodies would have due out to maybe talk about MOUs. But then I know we're trying to pull back in the other ones, so we just put it back in here. It's the same exact language we lived under for 2.5 years or whatever. No changes from our side. We just want to incorporate it into the contract.
Article 12 is the holidays. Trying to see how we could do this because this falls back into the end as well, but we're still asking for the additional 2 holidays. We'll see at the end that we're asking for a little different way to receive them, so.
Yeah, and we're, just to be clear, because it's not as clear as we like on there. It says Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve currently. We're asking that we receive both. So actually it'd be one holiday for the 12 months, the first year. And then you would have the other 2 down for Christmas and New Year's Day would be for the 10-month employees below, just to be clear, so.
And then 13.4, any holidays granted to any other employee groups are also be given to the classified employees. All right, the leaves, the primary thing is we still are asking for the 5 days bereavement leave. This feels something we really feel strongly about. And that these days would do not need to be taken consecutively, which makes no sense. Under 14.2, we decided supervisor instead of district. And was work for full contract here. We strike. And then 14.3, Mr. Blue.
Yep, so that we our last ask, I think was 7 days. Yours is at 3, we came down to 4. I think we'd feel like they're a little better cushion if there's 5, but you know, we are trying to get to a deal here. And even though this is a bundle proposal, we wanted to show you something that we could live with. And then the following blue is just the changes that would take effect because of that, like there are 4 days of district versus district, you know, that's not meant to change anything other than that first change, there the 4 days.
Then we have a new 2-year salary proposal. We would use your proposed salary schedule with the 4.5 and then the 2.5 across the step, 2.5, 2.25, and 2.0. And the way that we talked about bringing people down into it, we're asking for a 6% COLA. And then we thought a better way to do it also would then to be get an additional step starting January 1, which will also help with retention, will help bring us up to where we should be with the cost of living and as it continues to go up. And then for our longevity people, when they reach longevity and are ready to move up to the next step, we're asking for 5% right there, and then annually a 1% in between. And then for the second year, we're asking for a 2.5%.
Now, one thing that's not in here that Nancy, sorry, but Mary alluded to earlier was that holiday pay, we had discussions, and I didn't make it into this draft, but it's something we would consider, because we do want to try to get a deal with you guys, is spacing out those holidays a little, maybe doing, you know, Christmas this year and New Year's next year for like the 10 month or something like that, as a way to defer some of that cost. A ton, but we'd be willing to look at that too. We didn't include it here, but we did want to bring that up as a possible solution. If we're getting close on those things.
I have a draft of what we put our figures in, so that I really have to look and see, make sure we're working off the correct numbers.
So a couple of questions.
Okay.
So with your financial proposal on the salary schedule, just sort of thinking about it, so top step 15.
Yes.
The way I'm understanding this is, in essence, there's a 16, which is a 5%, right? So it's sort of an additional step once you hit 16. So I guess
Sort of just
15,
a bonus for hitting longevity.
so you get that step plus 5%. It's not, you get that step and then the next year you get 5%. That's what I just want to make sure I understand where you all are going with this.
I believe it was when you got to the step, when they were moving into the next step, they got 5%, but that would be what the step would end up being, would be the 5%. And then the
So,
1% would go there, so it'd just be that step that we create after step 15 for the first longevity would be a 5% step.
So
Instead of 2.5 or 2% between, it would be a 5% step. Does that
step
make sense?
16 is the 5%, step 17 is the 1%, step 18.
I mean, we're calling
okay,
it.
that's what I
Right.
wanted
And
to
then it'd
understand.
be-
Okay, thank you. And then, you brought the holidays, the additional holidays, multiple times. So I'm wanting to understand. Many times we've talked about wanting to be aligned with teachers. And teachers have the same number of holidays. They're different, some of them are actually different days, but same number. So I'm curious, as far as just wanting to understand the importance of the additional holidays. For that group, most of them don't work during that period of time.
Correct, but then that money also isn't reflected in their salaries.
Okay,
So
so
it's
it's
a way
a
to
way
get an
to get extra
additional-
salary. Okay, that's a,
It's a different way, and then to spread it out over the 2 years, adding one each year.
And we also heard when you talked about the fact that having one group have a holiday and another group doesn't, and one's gonna be at work, and that could create headaches, and so we tried to address that by doing it during times when they're not working, right? Normally, either group's working, and teachers do make considerably more than us, so it is about getting a little extra money for our folks as well.
I think we also looked at the non-rep holidays as well,
Yeah.
but there are. There's some different ones in there.
And when we did our draft, when we did the 6%, it did bring our starting wage at 15. It was like 15.02, so it did bring us up to
you're talking about that first cell.
the percent.
Have you warm yet? I think that's part of the strategy, is to get to a deal, right? Who can sweat it longest?
I think our teachers and students have been sweating it today too.
Yeah.
We got something going on, so
Yeah.
this wasn't just for us.
Did you message about the 80 thermostat or do I do a word for
I
it?
messaged.
Yay. Thank you.
13.3 is new language. So, can you help me understand which group that applies to?
Is this the blue language that's?
Yes, the Independence Day.
Yeah, so that was, it's actually, it's new and it's new and it's not, because we had Juneteenth and we had, if you look at the previous poll and Independence Day, so if you worked through it, you got the holiday, right? Well, we accepted your language under Juneteenth, if you noticed in there, it's in green. So all was left to say was if you work through Independence Day, you would get the holiday, right? So we're still having that ask. If you were a person who works through that holiday, you would get that pay. That would probably affect, obviously your 260s are not going to be affected by that. Most likely, most years, it would just be your 11-month employees, I would imagine.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand based on the work calendar, because our 260s do receive it, 'cause they do work
Right.
through that time. But the way I read this is, or wanting to understand, is if it's someone who comes back for summer, but doesn't normally work that, like our 230s, for example, don't work during that period of time.
Hmm.
So it seems intention, like there was some other reason this is put in.
It was meant just to cover those few people that might be, might get in a situation where they get extended or something happens where they're extended a little longer and then they'd work through the holiday, but they wouldn't actually get that holiday pay. The idea is to get people to pay when they're here, right? If they're not here, that's why you don't see us asking for 4th of July for 10-month employees, right? Because they're not here. Right?
So if a 10-month employee, classified employee works for the maintenance department for the summer, is that what we're talking
Well,
about?
that's what I'm.
That would be
trying
an
to
example,
understand, 'cause
yeah.
our calendar doesn't have any of them but our 260s. So that's, what I don't understand is if the intent is someone. Let's just use an office manager, something they don't work the last week of June and decide to come the first week of July, now that they're working with this supply.
Are you talking about somebody who's taking the summer assignment? Is that what you mean?
No, I think there's two pieces.
Oh.
It's that, and then someone who works the summer program. Would they be eligible based on your language?
I would say the second piece of that, the summer program, it's typically that's not the case. I haven't seen. Any of my contracts where it says that I mean, summer's a different, so we don't usually
Right.
include that.
We're talking about like 11-month employees and have to call back to come in.
Flexing.
Well, that's what I'm trying to
Right.
understand.
They should be, because technically, even though it's out of the contract, they're not working through that time.
And then I guess what I want to know, is it based on when they're asked to come in or the person chooses to?
I mean, anytime should be that they're asked to come in. I don't think we normally
Right.
just show up and work.
Well,
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
we have times when there's times when there's some flexing or swapping of contract days that occur.
right, but I think that's a request on the employee, and that's why I'm trying to understand this, is so we have a sense of who this applies to. Because work calendars, we've already covered, right?
Right.
So that I just want to understand the impact of what this means.
I would see it primarily applying to, I don't see the summer program as part of this. I would see it applying to people that are the 11-month employees that are, not to full 260, right? That maybe for some reason you needed to work another week, then it would work through 4th of July, then we get paid, right? That's really what I see. I mean, do you see a difference there?
because I think summer is a whole separate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's usually.
Do we have all of them on calendars?
Nobody
Well,
works.
our, like our
Yeah, that-
230 is our next 260, 230, and that group just starts at the end of July. And so that's why I'm trying to understand the purpose of this language based on our work calendars. And so didn't know what the intent behind it was.
Yeah, the intent is actually simpler than that. Is if they do work through the holiday, then they would get paid for the holiday. That's really the intent. There maybe it will never work out that way, but we want to have that protection in case they do work through that day. Like, let's say something happens in schools canceled for a week, well, that might push them in, where they might be working through that holiday, right? That would be one example, something that could happen. You need them to come back in for some reason because something's going on, that you need to have their immediate attention, or you start them later than normal for some reason. Now they work through that holiday, then they would be paid for that holiday, really. That's kind of the example that I can think of off the top of my head. But it's not related to summer. That's like right, that's a whole different animal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I do. I just want to clarify 1% between steps. When it says district proposed salary. I just want to clarify on, it says first year on the salary proposal, first year district proposed salary schedule. The salary schedule we proposed on August 9th reflects 2.5% between steps 1 through 5. 2.25% between steps 6 through 10. 2% between steps 11 through 15. 4.5% between ranges. And a longevity step that represents 5% above step 15 with annual step increases every year. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
everything,
I just want to check my box.
We can send it to you digitally if that's helpful too. Okay.
Can you send it all of these electronically?
I sure can.
And so. we had, when we spoke earlier, there was 2 articles identified, and when I went back and looked, Article 19. I have that we last provided a proposal on the August 22nd. And we hadn't received a response, so I actually think that was back in your court to take a look at,
It's probation.
yes.
Okay.
But I
think we gave you the same proposal back, as I thought we did, but I'll have to go.
I couldn't find anything in print, and so I apologize if there's some, we were searching everywhere. But that's what we think is on the 22nd, we gave something.
Okay.
And we
Okay,
just
We can
couldn't
look at
find
that now.
anything back.
Okay.
Yep. And we can send you an updated proposal too.
If you guys are okay with it for Concassate, there's the collaboration space over here. I can check the seating, but you're able to use a collaboration space.
We left our bags in the conference room, so we're looking at this now. Thank you.
Make sure you get your steps in, right?
It's cooler down there.
Yeah. All those extra steps in between will make up for it.
It's so
Right?
funny, I usually type of one that is, it's not weird.
Oh, it's supposed to be what, 99 tomorrow, what I was saying?
Yeah.
Well, I'm heading out of state.
We'll give you that too.
You need a state that's cooler.
Well, it's northern, so I hope so.
I don't know if it's gonna be.
Working my way toward the last, I don't know. We'll see.
I've never been to the last one. I always think about that.
Yeah, it's all right. Just can't drive a lot of places. Yeah.
Mary, you're already looking ahead.
There's another, I didn't see, I can't.
She's not
read
looking
it.
at the back.
There's another color. You do that on purpose.
The last time I used Fusion, it seemed like the
I like
paint
it.
was a little hard to read, but
It's way better than
so I
that.
did a slightly different thing.
It blue, I just can't read that blue.
But I did go ahead and do the green following what I believe we are in agreement with. And so this is for Article 23 safety. So actually, the good news is I think for most of it, we actually are in agreement based on making some updates throughout. And then the last piece is the health and safety situation component. I know you all were wanting to incorporate that into the contract as sort of a second section within that article. We still would like to see it as an MOA. But the pink are the modifications based on what we heard from you. And so we know you struck out unique. So we still felt like there needed to be something that identified this as something different than the norm. So we use uncommon.
I haven't seen that one before.
But then we also heard you're looking for, I think, just a little bit more simplified. And so when we get down to the bullets, in honoring, we thought the interest was more in the dollars, but it sounded like the leave was more important. So we went ahead and made that adjustment to do where it would be we're earning 1 hour of personal leave. When we talk process, our concern when we talk about one process is there's multiple steps. And so to any process really, what we took away was to simplify. And so looking at how can we do that, I think we'll have to put something together to make that as simple as possible. And at the same time, we just need to make sure all the pieces are there and incorporating. So we tried to use most of your language in here and just with some modification in that. And then the last 3 bullets are things that you brought forward in your last proposal as well.
So I see there's one bullet without anything next to it or writing where we want there.
I just didn't backspace.
All right. That's you're leaving it open for us.
I think it's highlighted in green.
Yeah, right. Whatever we say, it's
One
good.
is not blue.
Yeah.
Any questions on that?
We'll go back and talk. Anything right now.
So then I'm also leaving Article 19.
Yeah. I have those 2 down for us to talk about.
So, sir, half hour and
45 minutes.
45 minutes,
Because we have a
check.
lot to kind of.
Yeah.
We can check in
Well, I wasn't thinking we'd be done in half an hour.
and see where we're at.
Yeah.
Questions? Was there any extra views that went
And
around?
we might
Yes.
send you.
I just wanted to
might
get one for
send you
hybrid.
Updated proposal for night. Quite encompassing.
You could just say green as ours.
Mary would like.
Jennifer, did you get an article filed for June?
So thank you for your patience. We wanted to make sure we were being thorough and have everything ready, so.
But we could text people out of state, but we could text the people down.
I'm trying.
I'll get out of here.
Is that Google Chat from now on?
You'd have all these kids open, then you would get your Google chat.
Oh,
That's very strange.
Well, while you're caucusing, we'll send her a letter. Too.
Hey, I gave you an hour before I came down.
No, I wasn't complaining about it. I'm just saying we need to prepare for yours.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that everyone get a copy, but there's a couple extra others. Thank you. All right, so, walking through, I think we've made progress on Article 5. I went green, we're in alignment on Article 5. The one thing I wanted to oh, 5.5, I did want to point out, it wasn't noted on yours. I thought before we had come to an agreement, we think it's actually in the best interest of the employee, where the last piece is the pay adjustment goes into effect retroactive to the reclassification request versus the committee's recommendation, but I didn't see it on yours in green. So anyway, that's why that one's in yellow.
Yeah.
Rest of it's, I believe we're there.
I think we're there on the green, on this part too, but.
Well, I think so, but I don't want to make any assumption in case you are mentioned. Article 12, we skipped 10 because a lot of it, the actual language will come down to whatever we agree on the thing, so we didn't end up putting any of that in here. We understand. Article 12. So with holidays, we spent quite a bit of time talking about this. And we actually wanted to, we heard part of this was really being able to put more dollars into the paychecks. And so we're actually doing that through our salary proposal. And so we chose to actually put more there, looking at that versus making adjustments to holidays at this point. Our non-rep or 260s are aligned. Our teachers and most that have worked during that school year are aligned as far as the number of days. So I know that's another piece that have been discussed as well. In Article 14, so bereavement, we're adjusting to 5 days. Rather than add, there's additional 5 days, individuals based on a circumstance that they want or need to ask. We have language currently in the contract that allows for that. So we're leaving that. You had struck it, but we think it will meet the purpose of what you were asking for. And then there's nothing that's ever said they have to be consecutive. And so that's what up to the person, whether they need to or not. So we didn't feel that it needed to be spelled out there either.
Okay.
Personal leave, we went ahead and updated or made the adjustment to supervisor. 14.2.5, also the update. We do pay out based on an individual who finishes the year. 14.3, so 3 days was big for us to go ahead and make that adjustment. And so we're leaving that. Doesn't mean that some unique situation happens that the district can't make a call to do 1 more day or make up the days as Toby has pointed out in the past. So we wanted to be able to have that flexibility. Went ahead and updated 14.4.1. I think there was a need or a request, I guess, for some clarification that an individual would use the district leave closure before using personal. So went ahead and did that piece. Moving to 14.7, we're in agreement on that. Jury duty, 14.8. I think we're almost there. Last time we had brought forward just to provide clarity, rather than it say other employees, we wanted to clarify graveyard or swing shift. And I don't know if you recall, but the reason we are clarifying that is so someone who starts at 9 versus 8 in the morning, that could be other, and I don't think that was the intent of this, so we were wanting to update that. I think in concept, there was understanding, we just didn't see it in yours, so.
No, I think the other piece of this one was. And I don't have included here was that. The 2-hour thing for the people, the day shift people, that they would go home, they would receive pay for those 2 hours if there's less than 2 hours of shift left or whatever. Am I remembering that correctly?
I didn't see you have the 2 hours.
I
I mean,
think
we
it's
have that
contracted.
here.
Yeah.
They already said that the at least 2 hours.
Yeah. In the regular shift, yeah. Because the only concern I had was that they shall not receive pay for any hours not worked in a court. Well, if they have the 2-hour exception, that's, I mean, that's what I was talking about with that line I had in mind. But I don't think we're disagreeing with that. If they don't have 2 hours of their day left, they just go home, they get paid for the last part, right? So we don't need that. It's like, it's the point I'm saying. I think we're closer than we thought. So,
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Legal leave, we had, already agreed, and actually the language was there. Some of the green you had was there, so I didn't, in the contract, I didn't put it in green, just the new stuff, which was that last line items, the above leaves, that it references.
Yeah.
14.10, so actually, and you had your line item in green, and I think that may have been because earlier your proposal for probationary was 6 months, and now with the current contract, 9 months. So we're clarifying it's the probationary employees, which matches that article.
right, whatever it ends up, they gotta be probationary for this to be applying to them, right?
Right.
Yep, I understand that.
Okay. So, our last, and I know through our quick exchange downstairs, Article 19 probationary period, leaving with the current contract language.
I'm sorry, could you read in 1410, that sentence where you read? No employee within the first 6 months of employment will not be eligible for extended unpaid leave.
Where, I'm sorry, where are you?
14.10.
This is yours.
Yeah,
That's ours? Is it a
Yeah.
double negative? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Then I'll stop.
This one's ours.
right.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's a double negative. I think that's sorry.
Okay. So then Article 21. I think we're there, but I put a little clarification there. So Hobie, based on our last conversation and discussion through this. If someone's on their own time, which I would say own time, meaning unpaid time, lunch break, after work hours, that sort of thing. The thing that I want to make sure of is someone's on break, even though it's their time, but it's still paid time, that would not fit this particular piece. So the language is yours, but I put in parentheses unpaid time just to provide clarity so no one gets themselves in trouble.
So if under Bully's rules, I'm released to do my own thing under my own time, when it's my own time, even though it's break time, how would that square with the law? Because you're now putting saying they can't do this thing on their, because they're being paid, even though they're on their own break time.
But it's still paid time. We ran it by the attorney, and so I clarified to make sure. So
Okay,
if it's paid time, then it wouldn't be fit into that. So
Okay.
that's why we wanted to just provide that. I think we're close,
Yeah,
I
I
get
think
the
we're too.
idea, but
yeah, I'm just trying to understand that. piece.
Sure.
Okay. Right.
let's see. 21.3, we were in agreement, then we moved to Article 22. 22.1, we're good. Rest of the whole section there, we are good. 22.3.3 was fine with making that update. 22.3.5. The last sentence we're good. The one thing is, I understand what you're explaining about striking out employee, but employee can be other individuals, not just the classified. And so we felt because we use the term employee, that could be any employee in the district. So that's why we didn't strike that piece. Overall, the intent is not to disrupt the work environment, but then we also.
Maybe we could have a classified drug use employee, so, I mean, because that is a valid point, you
Right.
could be talking to a teacher or something. Like
Right,
that,
so anyway, that's
Okay.
why we didn't strike that particular piece.
Okay.
22.3.6, we're good. 0.8, we're good. 0.9, we still would like the 15 days. I realize, and I think anytime, if there needs to be more time in something, a request for that, and we'll work through that.
Sure.
But I think we need to start with 15 days, so we're not pushing it out too long, and then so many other things happen.
Okay, understood.
Let's see, 22.4. Again, just keeping with the 15 days. At level 1. I know you were explaining as far as the not wanting to have to provide reasons, but we actually think it's helpful to understand if there is concern why it's unacceptable. So it helps us figure out how to potentially move forward if we have more information. So we didn't necessarily want to strike that out. We
Yeah,
thought that piece was important.
I can see how that could. I can see both sides of this,
Mhm.
because I've had to, you know, I get what you're saying, well, we thought this would be good, why is it not bad, you know, why do you think it's bad? You know, but the person can also just sit there and say, I just don't like it,
Mhm.
and then we're in the same spot, it feels like, but I hear what you're saying, all right. And I'm assuming the one down here, the one that's not like halfway down under 22.42, I'm assuming that's just a typo that's supposed to be green, because the rest are all green.
Which one?
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sentences underneath 22.242. It says 5 days there, but it, like,
And
every
so-
side of it's green, but that one isn't, so I'm assuming that's just a missed one.
Actually, in yours, you had 5 days,
Did I?
and so that's why ours is yellow.
No, then I guess it was a missed one, then I'm.
So I just a little bit.
Right, okay, fair enough.
Level 2, we're in agreement with the 10. Level 3. Level 3. So, we actually wanted to leave the language as is. I understand that you had brought up the idea that more information comes about, but I think that information still can be shared. But we need to start with what was the original issue and then be able to provide that particular. So we didn't want to just change it, but we know that we can work together as far as having that additional. information.
Well, and if we're saying, what I think I hear you saying is, look, we're not opposed to getting the information when we get it, bringing it into the process, we just don't want to expand it to other issues,
Right.
which is what me and Nancy talked about, that I think we could probably live with that, so.
Let's see. Move to arbitration fees. So the one thing I noted on yours compared to the last one we had is the very last sentence of yours was not part of our.
No,
And so that was new, but it was in green. So it was new
It's,
information.
you're supposed to be blue, like that.
That's all right. So anyway, so I did
Yes.
put it in here. We're in agreement with the other part of it, but that last sentence.
Did you talk to your attorney, what is, I guess, her opinion of if that situation arises where they say this is best handled grievance procedure? Is it, would we be then at that point file that grievance? I guess that's the piece that this was new to me when I got it reviewed with me, so apparently some newer decisions.
Well, I think if I'd have to go back to my notes, I believe we pulled this directly from what Nancy provided us, this particular language. So, again, I think from what we've had, we try to work together. So
Yeah.
if something comes forward and it says this is the best method, then we need to talk about that and see what we can do. So the idea is we want to work through and
Sure.
come to a resolution.
Right. Yeah, I'm more or less thinking about, I mean, I'm a big fan of keeping it in-house, but
Mhm.
if we have a third party, poking around, sometimes these things happen and So I guess what we would do at that point, we would file agreements if they demanded it go through the grievance procedure. But doesn't necessarily we need to have that language either. So
Well, right, and we're both at that point, and if we get to that, we both have attorneys at the table and
That's
they're
true.
advising anyways, so.
Sure. Good point.
Then the next piece next paragraph, we're in agreement, and then the next strikeout, we're in agreement. Based on, again, we worked this whole language piece through with our attorney, and so everything we have is based on with her recommendation. We weren't necessarily interested in adding that additional piece.
Which additional piece?
Your blue, and it's the second to last paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, I turned the page right. My bad. So, yeah.
there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So then moving to Article 24. So I know we've been talking about, we would be very interested in multi-year, more than 2 years, but 2 years. We were excited to see that you're open to that idea. So we're bringing forward 2 years, updating the language accordingly, and then based on that, just going ahead and updating the current language where it talks about the limited reopener would be the insurance component piece.
Okay.
So then you can finally flip it over to the last one. And so, what our proposal is in year one, the district proposed salary schedule, that's the new one, and we just put in for clarity, so we have it kind of documented exactly what all of that means, the 15 steps is, annual step increase, the percents between the various steps and the ranges. And then also, just to be clear, and we haven't specifically talked about it, but I think it's important when we talk about when things go into effect. Our proposal is that the salary schedule is in effect to July 1. With a 3% COLA, and then in year 2, a 2.5% COLA. We also wanted to share with you to give you an idea of the impact on individuals, because I'm not sure when we made the significant change to the salary schedule, there's a big cost to that as well with all of those adjustments. And so we wanted to share some examples, just so you could kind of see how that might affect different positions.
So individually, employees who have been here the longest, who are further along in the salary schedule will definitely see the biggest change in their hourly rates. For example, with this proposal here and what the salary schedule would look like. A person on range 14, step 8 is currently at 2683. On the new schedule, they'd be on the longevity step with a rate of 3102. So the change in hourly rate for that individual would be 15.6%. And other examples for people who are maybe not further along on the salary schedule, somebody on range 12, step 3, currently at an hourly rate of $20.76 per hour. On the new schedule would be at step 5 with an hourly rate of $21.92. That's a 5.6% increase in the hourly rate. So it varies, based on where people are at on the salary schedule. And in general, folks who are on higher steps or on higher ranges will see bigger percent increases than people who are on a lower step or a lower range.
Does this include the 3% COLA or just the?
Yes.
Okay. Where are the majority of your people at? I don't know.
Range 9?
No, it's for them.
No, the EA2, what is EA2 majority of?
Well, I was asking if you guys know.
Well, when you say majority of people.
Are you talking about the scattergram?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the spreadsheet that you guys have, if you want to
Oh,
look
I
at
just,
the scattergram.
you off the top of your head, it's fine.
Allison has a thing that shows us, and they're way down. They're not.
Yeah, I think that was kind of our point. We have a huge chunk of people pretty low down on the schedule, so. Okay, well, do we have any questions about anything?
No.
If not, we want to review with you. We sent it to you digitally, so it's just a couple of weeks with 23 for you to look at. Did you want to go over the changes that we put in there? No. No. Just two small changes.
There was,
Did you send it, Hobie?
Digitally, yeah, to you and Ryan.
it was in the second and health and safety part, the uncommon health and safety situations. I got used to that word now. That's bad. Up at the first part, the first bullet in purple, where it says the employee will. We would like to add the employee will do a single submission that will initiate the district process. And then continue along that, and we know that the single submission may have multiple things to it, but we would like to just be able to get everything in at that one time. Makes it better for all of us, trying to track down employees. And so that was our change there, and then in the second sentence, such employees will receive 1 hour of personal leave per eligible incident, we'd like to add it there. But
So,
we also would like this in the contract, not as an all.
so will you share with me when you refer to eligible incident, what does that look like? So we actually spent time talking about that as well. Of what counts as an incident. So I'm curious to know how you all talked about that.
Yeah, so our understanding is that. And Isaac, step in with me on this, when we're looking at this. The idea is for the current, some things will be one-offs, pieces doesn't necessarily have to be recurring. But whether it's an eligible incident, we understand would be determined by criteria within the piece. But if somebody is being repeatedly hit by the same student or repeatedly having a drain, whether it's a environmental. If it's happening repeatedly, every time it happens, they put it through, and then you guys would determine if it becomes an eligible recurring thing, each time it happens, it goes through. If it's a one-off, student or I guess a faculty member throws feces at you, that on its own would be a qualifying incident. But part of the way we were picturing it, I think, is that the employee would do a one-step process, whether it could be the existing Google form with just a couple more questions added. Whoever's reviewing that to pay based on their answers would notify you for determination of eligible incident, because, a question that says, are you requesting, the 1 hour leave based on, and so that you could review those and then also notifies risk management, that type of thing. Isaac, speak more to the eligible incidents though. Please.
I think, where you have an individual who has a documented pattern behavior. Recidivist, I guess.
So I guess what I'm really trying to understand, I think we're in agreement on the concept, but really the definition of what eligible for. So an example would be, we talked about, I know you shared it a few times about yours, some of your experiences. You're working with a student and in this 5-10 minute period, the student kind of just has this manic behavior and hits you multiple times. Is each hit considered eligible? Is it that way?
I would be one.
And that's what we just wanted to
Yeah.
understand. And then you're like, you walk away, have a break, whatever, it comes back, then it happens again. That might be another eligible. That's what we were trying to understand what would count. And I didn't want to have a different assumption. Based on, again, you've had some of that experience we've talked about
And yeah, like I said, individuals who, kind of got a paper trail.
right. Okay.
Yeah, we had those discussions too, that exact example.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we weren't sure, so that's why I wanted to.
Yeah, again, it's not downplay the incidents, it's just to clarify.
But we did feel that if anything was involving bodily fluids, that didn't have to necessarily be, it's uncommon on its own, it doesn't have to necessarily be recurring. That's potentially.
Right, and the idea behind that, just because we have younger students who maybe aren't potty trained, that's different than using it in a different manner. So,
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
again, I think just clarifying for what we're talking about.
I just have something to go back to the financial proposal. So when you did the 5% of longevity step, did you think about what about people that stay beyond that if there may be another 5 years, maybe another 10 years, was there any talk about what we would do with those people? Where we had put the 1%, and was there any discussion about what would happen? I know they would get the COLA or whatever people got.
Yeah, that's that was our percent.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know we talked about with yours, that 1%. It almost seemed like then we're continuing to build that additional steps on the salary schedule. So we didn't necessarily look at that particular piece.
And I did have one other question. I just realized I didn't see it in here. So the COVID-19 pandemic language, is the district just not wanting to continue that language? I mean, we talked about this and maybe putting it in an MOU and that didn't seem to happen. So we put it back in the contract. I know we've had it for 2.5 years here and I don't think we've had any problem with it. I'm just curious. Are we saying we don't want that language anymore at all, just to go away? Is that what we're saying?
So, yes, as far as, we weren't interested in putting in the contract, and then as we talked about it more, just how everything's being handled within COVID, it just doesn't seem relevant anymore, that specific piece.
So would it be simpler to remove the COVID recommendation and just leave the pandemic language? Hopefully it's not relevant going forward. But
Well, right, I guess I would say if we got into another situation like that, I mean, this all caught us by surprise and we had to learn to do a lot of things. We would be at the table talking about like, how do we do, what do we need to take care of and that sort of thing, and that's what I would expect we would do. If something else came up.
Okay. All right, thank you for answering that. Start with a half hour?
Anybody else have anything? Yes. Okay.
On ours, it said, Article 11 shall open in second year of this agreement, but that didn't show up in yours.
Ours is in Article 24.
Oh, great.
It's still
Yep.
there.
It's still there, it's just the way, and you all have moved yours to 24 as well, it's just how we worded
It's
it.
in that last paragraph.
Yep.
No, that's okay. We looked at the line and we're like, well, we could just, it's already up here, so.
All right, cool.
Okay.
We'll,
Yeah.
See you
I'll
in a
see
bit.
you in about half hour.
Do you want me to walk up in half hour, Marcy?
Yes, I do.
That's
For logging to your Wi-Fi. Excellent, yeah.
I can do the steps.
Door opener.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Close, Robert, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
For now.
Sam's gonna go.
There's still live room.
Just a line.